this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this New Year, New Crafts cross stitch. But I'm really going to give you an overview of how to start any cross stitch project. You could also design your own slogan with the templates that are in your kit. Let's get started. So for your cross stitch and any cross stitch really, you will need an embroidery hoop of some sort. So I've got a 6-inch hoop here, but you could go bigger or smaller depending on your project. I've got some 11 count Aida cloth. I've got my needle, I've got a needle threader, and I've got my embroidery floss as well. I've also got my cross stitch pattern, which will be included in your kit, and some scissors. So the first thing that we need to do is put our cloth into our hoop. And this is really simple. If you've not done it before, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. But before we do that, let's just fold our cloth in half, give it a nice crease, and then in half again. Now this is so that we know where our central point is, and that's where we'll start our cross stitch. So to pop it in the hoop, what you need to do is unscrew the wee screw on the embroidery hoop, pop out that central hoop, and then if you lay your cloth on top of that hoop, now you want to make sure it's fairly centred and that the grid lines are straight. There we go. And then we're going to pop our other hoop straight over the top. Now we want to make sure that this cloth is fairly tight within the hoop, so you can kind of pull it round, make sure it's almost like a tambourine skin before retightening that screw. So the next thing we need to do is thread our needle, and we are going to start with this red E here because it's bang in the centre of our cross stitch pattern. So I've got my red embroidery floss here, and this floss is made up of 6 smaller threads. I don't know if you can see that. Now we're going to use 2 threads at a time, so we need to split our thread into the smaller sections. Now I'm going to take about a metre of my embroidery floss, and then I'm going to just cut it. Now you don't want it too long. The temptation is to make it really long, but as you're kind of stitching, it'll knot a lot more if it's really long. So don't do it too long. About a metre is absolutely fine. And then I'm going to go to one of the ends, and I'm going to take 2 of the threads. There we go. There's 2. And I'm going to slowly, don't do this fast or again it's going to knot. I'm going to split my threads into 2 and 4. There we go. That's our 2 threads, and we're going to stitch with 2 threads at all times. So I'm going to tie a wee knot in the end, just wrapping it around my finger, pop the wee end through. So now we can go ahead and thread our needle. So the best way to thread our needle with a needle threader is to thread the wire piece of the needle threader through the eye of the needle, like that. Then you take your thread and put that through the needle threader, like that. And then if you pull your needle threader back through, it brings your thread through for you, which is great. So this is your best friend when you're doing cross stitch or embroidery. There we are. Pull it down a wee bit so you've got enough that it's not going to slip out. And that is you ready to start your first couple of stitches. On your pattern, all of the coloured squares are a cross that you are going to stitch. The non-coloured squares, they relate to the little squares on your fabric. Now you might be able to see that there's kind of like 4 dots and it goes round a square. And that is, if you're needing to like count along one of the squares, you would count one of them and go on to your next letter. So everything kind of correlates to each other. So remember that, it's really simple, just a bit of counting. As a rule on this pattern here, there is 1 column between each letter, 1 full column that there is no stitching on, and 4 rows between each row of words. So you 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you'll be on to your next word. But just really keep counting, keep looking, and you'll be absolutely grand. So I'm going to start in the middle. I can kind of still see where my middle point is from my cross that we did earlier. And I'm going to start in the middle of this E. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to put that bang on the middle point of my fabric. So pick up my needle, and I'm going to come up from the back. And around about there, I can see that's kind of the middle, maybe there. And I'm going to do 1 diagonal stitch. Perfect. Now I can see from my pattern that this row here has 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 diagonal stitches. Now in cross stitch, you generally do all the same diagonals the same way and then go back and make them crosses. Now this is just so that if you make a mistake, it's so much easier to take it out than if you've got crosses each time. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go all the way along, just going the same direction. So that's me done 4, that's those 4 there. Now I can go back and make them crosses, and I'll do that just now, just so that you can see what I mean. But I prefer to do the whole letter all going one way, and then go back and cross them. But I'll show you just kind of how the crosses look just now. There we go. Super simple, making them into crosses. And this also helps to keep the back neat as well. So you can carry on and do the rest of your E. I'm going to now go ahead and do all of my E one way and then go back and make it crosses. So I'll show you what I mean. And if you need to get anywhere, so obviously I'm back out here and I want to go back to this bit to finish off my E. What you can do is you can run your needle under your stitches at the back to bring you to wherever you need to be. So I'm going to go in a wee bit. That just keeps it neat as well. And then I think I'm going to go kind of down here and along here. So I would just carry on. And make sure that all your under stitches are always going the same way. So all my diagonals are going that way first. And again, that just helps to keep things nice and neat. So now you can see I've done my E, all the stitches going one way, and now we just need to turn them into crosses. So you're going to go back over your whole E, just doing all your diagonal stitches but the other way. So if I start here, and you can see this makes it much thicker as well and more kind of pronounced. So that is my E done. I've done all my over stitches and made them all into crosses, don't know if you can see. And it's important that on all your letters, all of your stitches, your first diagonal stitches are going the same way, and then all of your over stitches are going the same way, just for neatness. I mean, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. But just when you're going on to your next letter, just check, okay, so I did my under stitches going that way and my over stitches going that way, and just try and replicate it. So obviously we need to get on to our next letter, and we've got this kind of thread here, and we need to finish it off so it's not going to fall out. So if you flip this over, and you can see the back looks lovely and neat because we did it all the same way first. And then you're going to run your needle under a kind of row of stitches at the back, not coming through to the front at all, just running that under, you can see, and then if I pull it through, and then go back down the other way under another row of stitches. And this will just secure this in place so that's not going to come out. There we go. And then you just snip off your excess thread. And our first letter is complete. So let's go ahead and thread up our needle again with another bit of thread, and then we'll go on to either our N or our W. You choose. So I've threaded up my needle again, and I'm going to go on to do my N now. So the rule of thumb is that any of the white boxes, they are gaps, and we have to count along so that we're not stitching in those gaps. The rule with all of these letters is that there's one full row between each of the letters. Now, obviously here you can see there's 3 spare boxes, but this is because the W kind of goes in. But there is still only one full row. You can see here, one row here. You can see between this R and this A, there's loads of space here, but there's one full row. One full row, one full row, even though there's loads of space here, still only one full row. Does that make sense? So obviously I'm going to count along 1. So I'm going to leave this row here and I'm going to go in here and making sure I'm going the same way as I did before. I am going to start my N. So go there. Now I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up. So I will go ahead and do 7 up, making sure not to stitch into my free row in between my letters. So I've done my first row, it's looking pretty good. And the next row I'm going to do is year, and that is in pink. So I threaded up my needle with pink. Again, I just got 2 strands of the pink. And a good way to kind of judge where your next row is starting is one, obviously, to count the rows. And there's always 4 rows between each word. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the rule is 4, but obviously we need to get it in the right space. So I've noticed here that the E actually lines up really nicely with the N. So I think that's a good place to start. So I literally just need to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So on my N, so it's this bit here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I sometimes do is I put like my needle in and just wiggle it a little bit to make the hole slightly bigger, so I can see that that's where I'm starting. And then I know it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 up. Let's just check. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going that way first, so it's actually that one. So then I can pop my needle through from the back. Again, I'm going the same way as before with my first diagonal stitches. Let me just double check that's 4. Sometimes it gets a bit confusing, so definitely double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's my first cross. And that matches up perfectly because they're in line. So that's a good thing to look out for. Again, you could do the same with your other letters. So you could think, okay, so the E actually again matches up really nicely with this N. On this one, I don't know, wee bit trickier perhaps. You might just have to go with the N and then just count down and then go over a wee bit. And the same for the 2022. But look for the kind of most obvious lineup, and that just helps you get it in the right space. And now I've just got to start with my E again, exactly the same as before, and keep going. So here is one that I made earlier. You can see that I finished this off and I've added on my little kind of Memphis-y shapes round the side. Now, again, you can count the squares and that'll give you exactly what we have here, or you could just do it by eye if you want to and just kind of add them in randomly. If you're counting the shapes, there's no rules here, so you just have to kind of look, there's a much bigger gap there than there is here. Just keep in mind and keep counting and looking, and then you'll get your New Year, New Crafts cross stitch like this. You can see what I've done at the back is I'm going to trim off any last little tails just to make it nice and neat. You might have some little bits that need trimming just to neaten it up slightly. And then I've cut the rest of my Aida off just to kind of make the back a bit neater. I've centered my design first, so before you cut anything, make sure you're happy with how it looks. So I was happy that that was in the center. I moved it about a little bit until I was absolutely pleased, made it nice and tight, did my screw really, really tight, even used some pliers to get that screw right round. And then you can just trim off the edge. This shouldn't fray too much if you get it trimmed right down to the hoop. And then you are ready to put that on a wee shelf, hang it on the wall, and boast about all the new crafts you're going to do in 2022. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, share your projects with us. We are at the Edinburgh Craft Club on Facebook and Instagram.